You said during your conference that you didn't visit Morandi's studio until the day of filming. What was the effect?
The thing I remember firstly was that it was so small. In the studio there were some of the objects, and the objects are immediately familiar to anyone who's seen his paintings over the years. You recognise the objects so strongly. That was very powerful, how the resonance and power of the object. And there was his bed, a very small bed, it was a window. And the whole place had been sort of reconstructed because the studio had been taken away and was coming back. So also I noticed that the reconstruction was slightly wrong. You know, things were not completely working at times. So, and so that was my main feeling, was all these things. And then I had decided to film something in there, and I had to decide on what. And so that's what happened in the next few hours, was to work out how to deal with the power Morandi already has through his paintings, and how not to, try and imitate or in any way parody that. So,
does film give the possibility to amplify the portrait?
The two films that I made in the studio are interpretations, or they sit parallel or aside from Morandi, and they are very much to do with as an artist you go into another artist's studio and you have perhaps a different perspective than a non-artist, because an artist, you understand to some extent process. So, and as Gianfranco was saying, that I'm also a bit of a detective, and I mean that side of my life, I can't resist being slightly inquisitive as to why and what and why is that not fitting. So for me, when I went into Morandi's studio, first of all, I was totally fascinated by these papers underneath the objects, which were like kind of palimpsests. They were memory drawings in a way. They had the memory of all his pictures, which is by drawing and outlining the objects. And in all my knowledge, and I knew a tiny bit about Morandi, but he wasn't someone I particularly kind of investigated. But in all the knowledge that I had, I did not know that these papers existed. So this was already something that was a revelatory to me, and I thought they were astonishing, and were a sort of coda to his paintings. And that was the one thing. And the other thing was, as I said, the beguiling resonance of the objects, which could beguile me to just film them. But I had to resist that in the end. In fact, I didn't resist it at first. I filmed them, but with unease, because I knew this was the wrong way. And in the end, after being there for the day, I kind of managed to work out how I could make a film there and not in any way imitate him, because that was I couldn't. It's like it was a very difficult thing to try and be in such a great painter's studio and do something with his material. Is quite a tricky thing for another artist to do, and so I had to be extremely careful. So I did the two things which he would never do. I used artificial light, which I never do anyway with my own films. It's very rare I use artificial light. So, and that's why I gave it the title Day for Night, in a way, because it was a false day, and he was somebody who would only use real light of the day in a particular period, and when that light had gone, he stopped. He was so rigorous about his light. So I defied that by having to not use natural light, because I wanted to not do, I had to be really clear in my head that what I was doing was not, in fact, was everything that he wouldn't do. And then the other thing I did was I made all his composition random. So there was a group of objects, and I would just go through the group. I didn't touch them, but I would just as they were as a group, I would try and make each object center of the frame and fill the frame as much as possible, so that all the other objects, their grouping became a random composition. So they would never be as Morandi would do it. There was, they were cropped for a start. He never cropped an object at all. So there were always a massive space around them. And even objects that were behind another object, I did my best to make it centered. So you don't understand the compositions until you understand that that's what's happening. So it's like a sort of random, ugly series of compositions in a way, which is, bringing in just the chance of if you do one thing, everything else becomes contingent on that. And so those were the two decisions that I made in order to not do as Morandi did, which was important to me. And then the other thing, of course, was to use black and white film and to just film the lines on these underscorings on